Welcome, everybody, to this edition of The Untold Story. I'm Martha McCallum, and it's great to have you with us. We have been living through an incredibly intense, historic news cycle, and I am very happy to have Byron Donalds, Congressman from Florida, joining me today. He represents the Southwest Florida District 19. And Congressman, I know our viewers are very familiar with you, obviously, and your work and your career. But for anyone who isn't, I always like to start the untold story by asking you to just give us a minute of sort of your background, how you grew up, where you came from, and what motivates you in terms of your political frame of reference.
So it's good to be with you. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised, Crown Heights, Brooklyn. My mom was a single mother. You know, my older sister's 10 years older than me. My younger sister's 10 years younger than me, my younger sister. And so, you know, it was tough. We were struggling, grew up poor. My mom put me into sports. She didn't want me hanging out on the street. So she made sure I was always in sports or always at museums, things like that. Always wanted me to be focused on education. Her advice, and I still hear it to this day, in my mind is don't follow the crowd, think things through logically, research everything for yourself, just don't listen to people. And so when I was in my career, this is, fast forward, I'm in my late 20s and it's around the financial collapse. I had already started my career in banking and was now working in insurance. And when I was looking at the financial collapse and trying to do research to help our clients and help our investors, I started to realize that I had major disagreements with the political policies of the Democrat Party, even though I was a registered Democrat. From there, I started reading about political philosophy and some modern politics, but mostly philosophy, and realized I was quite conservative.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes it takes when all of us sort of are more of age and working to start to realize, the difference between conservative and liberal policies in action and how they impact our lives and what we think about that. It's interesting hearing about your background and how you grew up. And I just want to ask you, because I know it's not easy growing up without a father figure for anyone from any background. What was the impact of that on you and your own thoughts as a dad? Because I've seen you with your son, and you're a wonderful dad.
Well, I mean, look, it's you just don't have that role model at home, and things between my mom and my dad didn't work out, and that's just the way it was. My mom really had to be mom and dad, and that's tough for anybody to be able to do. And so she did the best job she could. So I think the impact on me was you just didn't have like a male role model to look at, to lean on, to kind of see what the goal line is supposed to be for adolescence or for young adulthood or even adulthood, what maturity really looks like, what responsibility really looks like. And so with my sons, I try to model that the best I can for them, to demonstrate, how you're supposed to carry yourself, the responsibilities of being a man, the responsibilities of being a future husband, a future father, and why that's really important, not just for their own lives, but for their children, their families, and, really our entire family going forward.
Yeah. I'm curious what your thoughts are about the developments in the past few days, and there have been a lot of them. So President Biden has dropped out of the race, and Kamala Harris, the vice president, is now the presumptive nominee of the party. And there's been a tremendous amount of enthusiasm around that. She has raised a ton of money. It kind of feels like there's been a resurgence of enthusiasm around the Democratic campaign for the presidency. What do you make of it? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think a lot of their energy is because we all remember it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, they were in complete and utter chaos. They were despondent. They were dejected. They really looked defeated. And at that point, they had made their internal calculation that they had to push Joe Biden out. So obviously they're kind of having a euphoria moment, but that's not going to last because the campaign is going to have to now move into high gear. I've had an opportunity to listen to Kamala Harris on the stump the last couple days. She hasn't really said anything. It's platitudes. It's kind of a rewashed Barack Obama, Bill Clinton type of speech. But there's no new ideas, there's no new strategies of how she's going to move the country forward. It's this constant political trope from the left of we're not going back, we're going forward. But that doesn't mean anything, especially considering the fact that Donald Trump has been president of the United States. And when he was president, our country was more prosperous. Every demographic group was more prosperous. Our country was secure. Our foreign policy was in the best shape it had been in a generation.
So let's talk about the three things that seem to be emerging as the thrust of Kamala Harris's campaign. And that is abortion access, democracy, saving democracy, and freedom as a larger sense. These are the three emerging centerpieces of the campaign. So let's start with abortion rights and the freedom for women to get abortion. And there's a lot of discussion about Iowa, which now has a 6-week ban. Your thoughts on that as an issue in this election?
Well, listen, obviously, Kamala Harris is going to try to campaign on abortion. It's the one issue that the Democrats seem to be leading in polling as it stands right now. But the facts of today in America are that every state's going to make this decision. It is no longer just been decided by the Supreme Court in the most undemocratic process, I might add, because that's what happened in 1973 with Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court just took the issue away from the hands of the American people. Now our democracy, now our republic is going to go through the political process and make a determination state by state of how abortion is going to be managed and treated going forward. In California, in New York, in Illinois, they already have their abortion law. They're very likely not to make any changes. In Iowa, in Tennessee, in Florida, we have a ballot initiative on our ballot. Same thing that happened in Ohio. Every state is making that decision. So what you're witnessing on abortion now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned is that people are now making their voices heard. But for Kamala Harris to campaign on it like she can do something on abortion is not factual, it's not accurate, and quite frankly, it's gaslighting. Because the Dobbs decision is very clear. The federal government has no role in abortion. It's now going to be left to the states.
But she could push for Congress to pass federal legislation that would enshrine a national access right to an abortion, couldn't she?
In my reading of the Dobbs decision, she cannot do that. And that's one of the conversations up here on Capitol Hill is even if we could pass legislation federally, do we have the constitutional authority to do it, considering the way the Dobbs decision is written? In my view, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you really can't do that. So to try to run on that and make it a federal issue when it's no longer a federal issue is playing politics of the worst kind, because abortion is a very polarizing topic in politics. It's a very personal matter for women all across our country. So to use that for political purposes, I think is wrong, and it gets us off of the real issues that the White House and Congress can tackle.
The Untold Story continues right after this.
In terms of battleground states, it looks like the Harris strategy is going to be to move the needle in Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. That's where they appear to think their focus could be. And we're looking at a potential Senator Mark Kelly, vice presidential race that could help them in Arizona. Your thoughts on her battleground strategy and how you think President Trump can oppose it?
Well, I think the first problem is in the battleground states, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were behind massively, and that was before Joe Biden's terrible debate performance a month ago. They're going to still have to contend with their record. Kamala Harris was the border czar. She did nothing. She failed. She was the deciding vote on the American Rescue Plan in the United States Senate, because it was tied 50-50 at the time. She, as the vice president, broke the tie for that to be signed into law by Joe Biden. That bill is what started the massive inflation that wrecked everybody's household budget. She's got to answer for that. And then what is she going to do from a foreign policy perspective moving forward? She's been the vice president. She's been right there with Joe Biden every step of the way. So those issues, those kitchen table issues, those household issues really matter in the battleground states. How is she going to overcome that? I don't think that she can. And just throwing out lofty rhetoric does not address the issues that are facing the American people in those states.
So the other thing with regard to her focus, and I just saw her new ad, and it's interesting. There's no Joe Biden, no image of the two of them anywhere in this ad that she has just released. It seems like they're basically hard pivoting away from him, basically on day one of running ads. But it's all about democracy. It's all about freedom, and it shows former President Trump as a threat to those things in this country. What do you say to that?
The true threat to democracy has been the Democrat Party. They were the ones that basically tried to force 80 million people to take the COVID vaccine against their will. They are the ones that suppressed the free speech of the American people during COVID-19 era, to suppress information, to block information, to shadow ban information. They are the ones that forced tens of thousands of our soldiers to leave the military because they didn't want to take the vaccine. They are the ones who defied the Supreme Court on 2 different occasions with their student loan bailout. And then look no further than Kamala Harris herself. She's never received a vote to be the nominee in the Democrat primaries, whether it's 2024 or even back in 2020. Nobody's ever voted for her to be the presidential nominee. She got there because the party was scared about losing, and so they pushed Joe Biden aside, and they are coronating her. Nobody has elected her. She's being coronated. And so all those things are a threat to democracy. I will say this, when Donald Trump, and he was president of the United States, the American people had less regulation on their businesses. People were free to speak their minds no matter how they felt. There was no suppression of information or speech, and that will not be the case under a future Trump presidency. So they can lecture about democracy all they want. When you look at the details, it is the Democrat Party that has subverted our constitutional republic, not the Republican Party, not Donald Trump.
I want you to listen to what Joy Reid had to say, commentator over at MSNBC, for a moment. And here's what she said. Given the stratospheric entrance of Vice President Kamala Harris into the presidential campaign, she's now secured enough delegates to become the nominee. You're going to look real crazy being on the other side of that line, particularly as a person of color, but really as anyone who claims to have any connection to the culture. And she goes on to say, you're going to look real weird and real lonely on that side. You're going to look crazy being on the side that has given the cultural phenomenon of Vice President Kamala Devi Harris. She's about to make history. She's about to become the first woman president. What's your reaction to that?
Well, 2 things. First, Joy Reid is race baiting. So what you're saying is that because she's a black woman, that if you don't stand with her, now you're not in the culture anymore, you're not black. That's literally what she's saying.
It's like
that's
the "you
race
ain't
baiting.
Black" comment from Joe Biden.
It's race baiting, and quite frankly, I'm sick of it, because all that race baiting doesn't fix the issues in our country. It doesn't secure the border. It doesn't have a strong economy for people. But the other thought, the language she uses, stratospheric, this is coming down from on high. Kamala Harris isn't Cleopatra. She's not a goddess. She's a politician, frankly, one of the more radical left politicians, and she's not been very good at this. She was chosen by Joe Biden to be on the ticket because Joe Biden famously said he needed a black woman, and he chose Kamala Harris. But nobody has ever really voted for her to a position at this level of consequence. When she became a United States Senator, there was no opposition really in California. When she became Attorney General in California, there was really no opposition there. And so this is the first time she's in a real campaign, because the last time she was in a real campaign, Tulsi Gabbard ended it on the debate stage. So Joy Reid can have these commentary all she wants, but it's not reality. I find this image making, this reshaping of Kamala Harris from somebody that the Democrats internally would tell you they never thought she could ever get their nomination is laughable to me. And so for people, I would tell people, don't be intimidated by Joy Reid and these people. These are the same people who lied to the American people that Joe Biden was fit for office for 4 more years. It's the same people that lied, and they're lying now.
So let me ask you this. You were on the list of people who were potentially vice presidential nominees. So given this scenario of a woman, her parents were Jamaican and Indian, is her background. How do you see yourself? What's your role? Because there has been a big interest among Black voters in moving towards the conservative lane. That could change now. So do you have a role in this presidential race? How do you see yourself helping your side?
Well, I was going to do the same thing I've been doing, which is taking the message of Donald Trump's agenda, the conservative movement, the America First movement to all people everywhere. And it's not just about my race, and I know that. It's not about that. It's about the policies, and it's about explaining them so people understand that when Republicans are in charge on Capitol Hill, we may not give flowery speeches that have descended from the heavens, but we're about getting the job done for the American people. And I think that for far too long, Black voters in particular, but voters in America overall, have been given the same flowery speech over and over, same talking points, the same line of they're trying to take us back, and you got to get out there, you got to stand with us, but nothing ever changes. And there's a lot of people in the Black community and throughout our country who are sick and tired of being sick and tired. We've seen this before. They're really trying to make Kamala Harris Barack Obama 2.0, but we don't have time in our country for that. So what I'm going to do is speak the truth, take the message everywhere, and then fight hard and work hard for President Trump, and we'll see how the election shakes out this November.
So you plan to get out and campaign by his side?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that the choice of Kamala Harris causes any questions about the pick of JD Vance to be the vice presidential nominee with President Trump?
I don't think so. I think, look, President Trump went through a long list, and trust me, it was a long list. Everybody was qualified. He made a great choice in JD. I think, obviously, they're looking at the electoral strategies of the states that obviously are going to matter in this campaign. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. How are you going to manage those states? How are you going to deal with potentially Virginia or New Hampshire being in place? See what happens there. Then you have Arizona and Nevada. Donald Trump had a plethora of talent. He made the right choice. We're going to make sure that he's the next president and JD's the next vice president.
Byron Donalds, thank you. It's always great to talk to you, and nice to talk to you in a little bit more extended form here on The Untold Story. So I hope we can do it again. There's so much to talk about as the campaign moves forward, and you're a great voice and powerful voice, so we appreciate your time, sir.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
That's Byron Donalds of Florida, and that is The Untold Story for today. I'm Martha McCallum. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.